excited to finally be here at camp. My name is Kildea, and today I would like to talk to you about some of the physical processes we have here at Radwell. But first, who is Radwell? We buy, we sell, and repair industrial automation and electrical control equipment. So don't worry if you don't know what that really is. Just think about some of the equipment that is in factories, manufacturing facilities, and conveyor belt systems. Basically, our customers are those plant managers who we try to help sleep better at night by reducing their downtime and beating inflation. We do this by providing all of our products in a wide range of conditions, from new to used, and we even repair. And our asset recovery program is Radwell's sustainable way to keep your unused electronics from becoming e-waste and ending up in landfills. We are continuously expanding our physical footprint in all of our product lines. Currently, we're in 8 separate countries with 70 locations. But for the sake of this presentation, I'd like to just focus on these select few. I'm a business process analyst, where I build data models using tools like Disco and Excel. You see, Radwell is very entrepreneurial in spirit, and our rapid growth has led us to suspect that some of our processes are just are straggling behind. I also wanted to take Radwell beyond Visio. See, in the past, we've tried to map out all of our processes out on a big piece of paper on a conference room table. And if any of you have ever tried to do this before, it's a very laborious task. I also knew we had terabytes worth of information that I knew we could just use a little bit more constructively. So I was in the market for a business process management tool, and this just led us to Disco. For all of my projects, I got to work with these great managers. They know their processes very well. Through their years of experience, they all have developed gut feelings of how the process really works. So this was our first opportunity to take a step back and evaluate our information in a new way. We wanted to work together to compare their gut feeling to process reality. So let's make things a little bit more concrete and dive into my first use case, the repair production process. As the name suggests, this team is responsible for repairing the industrial electronics, hydraulics, motors, and all sorts of other products sent in from our customers. They currently use a system that helps them manage over 26 million part numbers from hundreds of manufacturers. So let's think about some of the complexities that might add to some of the management's gut feelings. How much product knowledge an individual employee needs to have. The physical layout of all of our buildings, or even the fact that we have now 70 sites. But for this project, we're only looking at the 6. So it's time to start the process mining project. So I assembled my team and started trying to set expectations. Pretty much what process mining is and what it's not. We also needed to evaluate what they were doing and why they were trying to gather their thoughts and why things are going wrong. So through those discussions, we discovered that they had at least 2 gut feelings of what was going on with their process. The first was that the majority of our repairs were taking longer than our 14-day promised turnaround time. And the second, that there was extra activities that were adding extra time to our process, leading to just bottlenecks. So this was also our first opportunity to look at our processes from start to finish instead of our current in-house summary view. And what I mean by the in-house summary is this view. It's our aggregated overview overview of all the work that we have in our shop. We can filter down to what location and technician, but I think this really limits our ability to understand what our process is doing because of the 4 columns in the middle. Those 4 columns represent the time it takes, represent the elapsed time that a product is spent in each one of those statuses. So for example, for pending customer approval, it won't end up in the problem bucket until it's been in that status for 35 days. Whereas dispatch to technician will end up in that same column in only 2 days. So if you're trying to cherry pick and see what's going on with your process, having things in the same column meaning different things really add to the confusion. So before we go into data extraction, I worked with management to see if they could give me some information to baseline my data needs. They did a little bit of math and gave me this exact unit count that we did. So I knew if I was anywhere close to this number, my job was going to be a little bit easier. So for our data extraction plan, we wanted to look at 3 years worth of information. This gave us a fair range to see how activities were trending over time. And we also wanted to know, we also wanted to use our Radwell serial number as our case ID. A Radwell serial number is this little license plate that we affix to every single one of the units on a customer's order. This helps us keep things separated, and it allows us to track what work we've done on your unit. For the time span that we were looking at, we really only had 6 sites in the US. We've expanded since then, but for the sake of this presentation, we're just focusing on this. And the other 2 attributes we added because I knew we were going to ask questions about that. So I was actually very fortunate to have all of my data needs in just basically one spot, and that was SQL. So all of our multiple ERP systems kind of just continuously add and feed into the one source, making my job easier. So while going through the data extraction, you have to sit back and think, just like Ann was saying, how clean is this data? Or is there anything that I have to worry about as an analyst? So one of the things that I ran into was that the main table I was using was actually a shared table of many other processes. So I had to find out a way to filter out just the repairs that I'm concerned about. We also knew through the extraction plan that we only wanted to look at completed repairs. This was an analytical project, so we only wanted to look at historical things. Nothing that was work in progress, no RMAs, which are just returns, and nothing that was canceled. But there were 2 data extraction quality issues that I'd like to talk about in a little bit more detail. Excuse me. The first is just simply daylight saving time. This might seem like a simple problem, but the issue I was running into is our work management system was showing time locally to my PC, where IT stores everything in the database in universal time. So I would like to share this code with all of you, just in case it might help one of you in one of your future projects. All you need to do is adjust the numbers in the middle to whatever time zone you're in, based on whatever the database is showing. The second data quality issue only became apparent after I started putting information into Disco. Come to find out that our Radwell serial number is just really not that unique enough. As I was going through the process maps, I started seeing certain activities have an absolute frequency of 2 or more. But working with management, going through their processes, I knew the receive status should really only ever happen once. So I had a question, was this just a bad process, or is this something that I did? There's just all these different thoughts that you have to constantly think about while doing these analyses. Going back, talking to management, kind of giving them what I'm seeing and getting some feedback from them, come to find out that I was missing a column. So what happens is that multiple customers might send their product back to us for repairs, basically just like you would take your car to a mechanic multiple times, every time something would break. It's the same case here. So through Disco's import process, I needed to join our S number and activity together to create a brand new unique case ID. And I did this for all future iterations, and that solved my problem. So sit down and ask management, whoever you're working with, if something like this might happen. Learn from my mistakes. So now I'm in a really good spot with data extraction, and I think the information is good enough. I'd like to just go straight to the summary page. There's a wealth of information on that page, and you just click around and kind of get a sense of what your data is really doing. And come to find out, The very first screen I look at is starting to confirm some of management's suspicions about our repair process taking much longer than 14 days. But I knew as an analyst that this is before we started taking out any outliners or taking other things into consideration. We just pulled in all the data we needed, and we can filter out from here. So on the bottom of that page, I like to just sort on duration. It's a really good gut check to see what our over-under is against what our 14-day is. And as you can see from the position of the slider, that more than half of our information is 14 days or older. So now I know I need to just take a step back, look what's going on, and see how the data is skewed. The best way I think to do that is just to use a performance filter. This is a really good 30,000-foot view of what your data is really doing. As you can see, we have a very long tail that goes to the left, and we have a max of 3 years on one of our orders. It's a very long time when we say 14 days. There was more issues with that, but this is the reason why this filter exists. We can filter these things out. So that's exactly what I did. I went through and just applied the really basic Pareto 80-20 rule to just see what 80% of our cases were doing. And come to find out, we're pretty close to what our last average was at 44 days. But now I got to think, what's this impact? What's this impact of the gut feeling that we really have? And there we have it. We're hair off of what our promised delivery date on the majority of our cases. So this is a sigh of relief for myself and to management, but we know we're not out of the woods because there are definitely things that we need to work on. So before we started to look at our process maps, I sat down with management and asked them, hey, what does your process look like to you in your head? Let's go through it and just put down all the basic steps that we need. Through many conversations with management, we ended up just selecting these 11. These are our 11 steps for our repair process from start to finish. So we consider this our perfect path. But I have to question, can we make all of our process this generic? Or is this even still too complicated? It should be, it comes in, it goes out. That's it. 2 steps, we're done. All of you are probably very familiar with this type of spaghetti map. You also know this is really where work starts for the analyst. As you can see, we have many sub-processes within our process, but those 11 steps are majorly highlighted in blue that kind of run through the middle. So our management was right. They knew our process pretty well, but there was no way we could ever build this in Visio. So we iterated through and looked at this process map and asked a bunch of questions. But for this presentation, I just want to focus on a few of the process loops we found. The first process loop I'd like to talk about is our sent to location loop. As you can see, this takes about 10% of all of our cases. The problem with this is that it's adding about 1 to 3 days to our process. It's this extra step that we go out to the side and come back, and not much has been done. But there's a reason for this. We do ship our product, your product, across the country because we want to make sure that we can get to the best technician we have so we can get it back to you as fast as possible. We also, certain locations have rare, unique test assets that cost tens of thousands of dollars, so we can't have every location have these things. So we do use this as a strategy to be able to move product around. To think about how many hands are needed to make decisions of what goes where and how many more are needed to actually move things around. It adds undue cost to our process, and it's something that we just need to always consider. So I went through Disco. I iterated through one of the activities I pulled in to try to see who I needed to start having conversations with. There were three main branches that were concerning because they were using this process the most. So we pulled them in the future conversations with global management and with our branch managers to ask them, why are you using this status so much? What's going on? Do you need more text? Do you need more tools? Just like in a really open session of what's happening. So as a result of all those conversations, we came up with a list of about 16,000 part numbers that we said, these parts need to come here and those parts need to go over there. Just because of product knowledge or test assets. But that's really only half the problem. Our technicians know what they're really good at, but our salespeople are just selling. So we had to create a system to communicate that list with sales. So we worked with IT, and during the sales order process, there's a little window that pops up and says, hey, this needs to go somewhere else. It doesn't matter where the customer is in the country, tell them to send it here. We also unofficially left this project open. We hold quarterly meetings to continuously add back to this the 16,000 list. Things change over time, so we're leaving this very flexible. The second process loop is awaiting manual requisitions. This process is where a technician needs to pull our surplus inventory out of stock to have a working example to try to fix a customer's unit. Sometimes things come in, there's burn marks on it, we don't know where to start. So if we had something that worked, we have really good lead time. The other reason why we use this status is because we might need to cannibalize parts off of those parts that we're bringing out of inventory. Some of the units that we're working on are from the 80s. So that product's not being made anymore. Those chips don't exist. You can't buy them. So we happen to have the inventory, so we're just going to cannibalize those parts. The problem with this is it takes 1 to 3 days for the inventory to come down. The inventory is no farther than those doors are for me from the tech. So they should just walk over and get it. So we had to have conversations of why this process was taking long. It should only take about an hour in our minds. So I iterated through the information yet again to find out which branches I needed to start having conversations with. Disco was able to confirm my gut feeling that New Jersey, which is also the location with the most inventory, was the biggest user of this task. So now it's time for inventory management and production management to come together and try to come up with a solution. So through those discussions, we've come to find out that the technicians were requisitioning parts that were in a special no-pick zone that inventory set up. The zone was designed so that inventory could do cycle counts or move things out of inventory to prevent it from being placed on sales orders and kind of keep control of what's going on. But the technicians didn't know this zone existed. So they were requisitioning all these items down, and there was actually really no item to be picked. We also decided that we should hire a night crew. A lot of the technicians do some of their work later in the afternoon to try to feed what they're going to do for the next day. So they were putting in a lot of their manual requisitions very late in our workday, and a night shift helped go through and clean all this up. So when the techs walked in, they had all the parts they needed, 8 o'clock in the morning. So these were some of the positive outcomes that we had from analyzing our process loops for our repair project. So to jump into use case number 2, this is our pre-evaluation process. And these are some of the test assets I was talking about earlier. They do a lot of fancy things that are just well above my head. The pre-evaluation process is more on the receiving side of our purchasing process. This team goes through and evaluates that the items that we're buying from vendors are still working as the manufacturer intended before we put it on the shelf so we can ship it to you in the same day. So time to assemble the project team, yet again. We assemble a new set of folks and we go through what this project's going to look like, what my expectations are going to be, and set some ground rules. Again, what process mining is and what it's not. More importantly, I needed to gather what their gut feelings were about their process. We determined that there were 3 major concerns that we wanted to really focus this project on. The first was that the purchasing process thought the pre-eval team was taking too long. We promise a certain amount of time to our vendors that we're going to pay them. So if this team takes longer than 30 days, purchasing still has to do their step of the process and get the vendors paid. So it's relationship management that we're worried about. The second was that they thought that there was an increased workload coming into their shop that's a very recent event, but they knew their staffing levels were staying the same. And the last gut feeling was that one of the teams inside of their department was showing a lot of signs of slowing down, specifically the servo team. They thought they were the bottleneck of the process, which was contributing to why we were taking longer than 30 days to get things received in. So I worked with them, worked through their process, physically walked some product all the way through, and they actually use the same system as our repair staff does. But you'll notice that they just use a bunch of different statuses, and nothing's ever a problem. It's a good sign. The baseline information for data extraction plan, they were able to run their reports that they have in Excel and give me this number. So again, I just need to be within the 26,000 ballpark. So for the data extraction plan, we looked at the previous 2 years worth of information. Really only concerned with the lot number, because this was inventory, so one lot number might represent 100 units, or one lot number might represent just 1 unit. So we understood that going in. But we looked at this process at a much more micro level. We only wanted to focus on New Jersey. This is where the team exists, and we wanted to compare departments versus departments of the same process versus all the other branches. And the other two attributes we brought in, it's data that we know about, and we knew we were going to have questions around them. This, however, shared different quality issues than our repair project. It's stored in the same table as a repair information, and the problem with this is this doesn't have a complete flag. So as you're pulling information out, if you can't just say there's a hard cutoff, we don't want anything that's past this, it just makes data extraction a little bit finicky, and you're going to pull in a lot of extra information. Which leads us to my first data quality issue that I needed to handle. Since there was no complete flag, I was pulling in information that just kept going. So the top case, you can see the process ends right on the pre-eval complete status, which was the expected end, but some of the cases just kept going. There's many other steps that happen after this because they're at the very beginning of this process. But I knew from the training that Rudy gave me and all the things that are on Disco's website that this wasn't going to be a problem. Just take it, put it in Disco, and filter out from there. So this led to dominating events. As you can see, variant number 1 took up 15% of my data set, but it only accounts for 2 events. I don't even think 2 events is really a process in my mind, but we needed to filter this out because that was just muddy in the waters, and the process map wouldn't look right. So that's what we did. We went back to the trusty performance filter, and I worked with management to try to figure out, hey, what's your process really look like? What's your natural input? How many steps do we need to be worried about? So we decided to just move the slider up to 6, and they were really interested to seeing all the extra processes that we did, so we left the very long tail as well. So back to the summary page we go, and this did 2 things for us. It disproved our first gut feeling that the process was taking longer than 30 days. As you can see here, it only takes about 22, and this includes processes that are after the pre-eval process. And it also proved management's gut feeling that they were seeing an increased workload, indicated by the gigantic mountain on the right. So this is about a 6-time increase year over year from previous year activities, but yet their staffing level is still the same amount of people. So it's just concerning. So after we looked at that, we were able to prove and disprove 2 of our gut feelings. We moved to our process map to see what the process really looked like. But unfortunately, their process is really boring and straightforward. There's no extra little steps. So for this project, we focused down on just 2 of our activities, awaiting pre-eval, which indicates our backlog for the team, and the surplus pre-eval status, which indicates the actual working bucket of the team. So I iterated through each one of our repair categories because it represents an individual team on that department, and wrote all the information down for all those 2 activities in Excel. And this gave me this. There's a nice side-by-side comparison to see teams' performance against themselves, as indicated by the colors throughout the years, and the teams against each other. This side-by-side look actually disproved our third gut feeling that the servo team was the team that was taking the longest. Come to find out, they're actually one of the faster teams in the group. But nobody paid any minor attention to our hydraulics team. As you can see, they went from about 2 hours per process to almost 60. So you have to question, what is this really telling me? What's going on with this? Why is this team showing signs of slowing down when the process really hasn't changed all that much? So I iterated through all my information in Disco again to pull out how many cases were happening per group. There's 2 separate iterations, but it gave us this side-by-side look. As you can see, for the first half of 2022, the servo team was about on par with what they saw all of last year. But the hydraulics team saw a 3-time increase in their workload compared to everything they saw all last year. So we worked together and kind of came up with a solution, and we figured that hiring new staff was probably the best approach to try to fix this problem. The increased workload definitely warranted just putting a new body in this situation. Although fixing processes, you don't typically add more people to help fix those processes. So to help close this presentation, I would like to go through a few lessons learned. Basically, the things that I would do differently if I could just start all over again. The first is it is far better to start off imperfectly than being paralyzed by the delusion of perfection. This would have saved me a lot of time and headache in the repair production process when I was extracting the data, because I was trying to make my query right on that baseline number. I should have just opened it up a little bit more and iterated through Disco. It's a very fantastic feedback tool because I work a little bit more visually, and data is not super visual what's going on. The second is process knowledge is key. I'm not an expert in fixing anything, but the team is. So you bring in your team as early on in the process as possible. Tell them what you're trying to achieve and work with them. We're all there to try to improve. Also, I'd like to share my project approach I took for all of my processes. But it's very interesting to come later on. I found out through one of the cafe sessions that I got pretty close to the 12-step process of process mining. It's a pretty unique one-to-one relationship between what I was trying to accomplish and do through all my projects and then what the experts kind of came up with. So thanks for the team, to Fluxicon for their continued efforts of blogging and doing all these things, because I was able to learn a couple things from that. So thank you. Special thanks to Julie, who's in my marketing department, to help me put all these slides together. And thank you all so much for your undivided attention and help making my very first public speaking event a thing of the past.
Let's bring back this one slide. So while we are looking for questions, so everyone, do you have questions for Eric? I wanted to maybe start with the first question, because what I really, is it on?
It is now.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. I wanted to start with the first question because I think I really like this overview, which shows your working process. And I think what you can see really nicely is that there's a lot of focus on the explorative analysis. So a lot of the steps that you have been doing were really in this exploration, understanding the data, right? Understanding the process through data. And what was also interesting when I saw this is that actually almost all of the 5 steps were being done together with the process managers who had the gut feeling and the domain knowledge, right? Is there any phase where you did not involve them, or were they involved in all of the?
They were involved mainly in the current data views, because that's the work they do in, and then the data analysis, exploration, and down. I didn't include them into trying to pull information out of SQL. They work in production. They don't know SQL, so it was just a tandem thing. But I had to keep showing them the information as a feedback loop. But that would be the one I'd say they weren't as heavily as involved in as the rest.
Yes, yeah. So I really like these examples that you gave. And for example, with sent to a different location where it's really like one team has the expertise, it's in a different place. So can you actually find a way to really ship it there directly? That's something that you don't come up with as an analyst if you don't know the process, right? But they have this expertise. So come up with improvement ideas in the first place.
Some of those questions didn't come to my mind until I started looking at the process map. You know, you can explain our process, and if anybody saw, we have about 97 activities. We think there's 11, but in reality we have 97. So to try to work that out with talking sessions is usually very difficult, and people forget about stuff. Yeah. So I kind of stumbled across that by looking at the map before I present it to management.
Yeah. And also that there's some of the gut feelings got confirmed, but others were also not confirmed.
That's right.
Yeah. Is there one, would you say was the gut feeling that people were most surprised with, that they didn't expect at all?
The biggest one was how many extra activities in the repair process. And I'll just kind of switch back if you don't mind. Going back fast. Almost there. There you go.
Yeah,
right.
Okay.
So all the extra little steps, and we did do an iteration of actually watching this process through the people that it passed through as well. And we found one employee actually touches these statuses. She's in like the 23% of touching everything. But that was the shocking thing, that we didn't think it was this many activities. So certain groups get to see certain activities. So the combined effort of passing things along from the receiving team all the way out through shipping, that they're like, oh man, there's all these extra steps that we go through. So are any of these actually necessary? And that was a focus of a lot of the projects that we did, is just trying to trim these out. Let's not do them. They don't exist anymore. Keep it in that main flow of things.
Yeah. Okay, do we have more questions for Eric? Yeah, the microphone is coming.
Well, thanks for the presentation. Very interesting.
Thank you.
I was wondering, and I think you touched upon it in the beginning a bit, how did you actually convince, let's say, Radwell to start using process mining? And how did you get the time of all of these people that were involved in all of these steps?
Very convincing. So I actually I evolved from being a project manager in IT and a report writer a little bit. And I worked very closely with our CIO, and he's very interested in what's going on with our data. Like I said, in the past, we physically try to walk our processes through on Visio, and I sit around with clipboards and counting how many steps people were taking instead of just recording their screen, which after I found that out, I was like, why did I do this? So there was already a little bit of synergy there, but we never could find a tool outside of just Excel dashboards that could tell us what our process is really doing. We have great reporting. We use SSRS, so we know all these numbers, but that's not indicative to what's really going on. So instead of trying to have all these sessions over and over again of let's walk things all the way through physically, because you only get 1 to 5 cases from that, we needed to find some kind of business process management tool. So I started looking around, and I think I started with ProMind 6. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Oh, there's a commercial version. Let's buy this and really move forward with this. So we're actually going through a couple more projects right now with this tool. And it helps management understand what their process really looks like. They're just in the day-to-day. Step back, look that forest through the trees, and see what's going on. So this is really starting to take off in our company.
Any more questions for Eric? No questions at the moment. Of course, we can also talk further in the breaks, so you can find him and can talk more. Right. So then let's thank Eric again and prepare for the next.
Thank you, everybody.